Hi, I'm Jason Barnard. This is SEO in 2025.
Jason, what's your number one SEO tip for 2025?
I'm going to give you the tip that you need to focus on entity optimization for EEAT. At Kalicube, we call that NEATT, N-E-A-T-T, and I'll tell you why in a moment.
NEAT seems easier to say. Is that the reason?
One of them, yes.
Okay, what does the N stand for?
N stands for notability. Google don't talk about notability, but a little bit of famousness always helps you in Google's mind and in your audience's mind. And if you want to get to the top of anything, entity lists included, you need a little bit of notability. And then the other T on transparency, so it's N-E-A-T-T, is if you're not transparent about yourself, nobody will trust you, including Google.
Going back to the N, why is notability different to expertise?
Being famous for your expertise rather than just being an expert.
So what's the difference? I mean, how do you measure your level of fame?
A lot of people would look at Wikipedia and say, well, if I have a page in Wikipedia, then I'm notable. And Wikipedia famously has notability measurements or guidelines. We're not looking at Wikipedia famousness, we're looking at niche famousness. So, for example, somebody might have the same expertise as Jason Barnard, but they're not as well known, they're not as present online as Jason Barnard. So I would have a higher level of notability in the SEO industry, for example, than somebody else with an equivalent level of expertise, i.e. they know as much as I do, they're simply not out there being recognized.
And remind me what the second T was.
Transparency.
Transparency, okay. So that you feel isn't covered, yet is still exceptionally important.
Yeah, if you look at entity optimization, knowing and understanding who the entity is and that they're trustworthy is super important. And what we find, especially in SEO, is some websites don't have a very clear identification of who is behind the website. And we'll look at that in a moment. Who publishes the website? Which company is behind the website or which person is behind the website? And if you're not transparent about that, you're going to lose the game in the long term, because Google's currently using a website as a measurement of credibility, using links in particular. The more it moves forward, the more it's trying to understand who publishes the website, who's behind the website, can we trust them? And if we're not transparent about it, it can understand who they are and it can't understand if it can trust them or not.
Brilliant, okay. And you also talk about 3 tiers of SEO, and 2 of them require entity optimization. So what are the 3 tiers of SEO?
The first tier is what I would call traditional SEO. It's what we're all doing and we've been doing for 28 years, in my case. Content and website level optimization. So the content itself, the site speed, incoming links, internal linking, structure of your website, all of the things that we do in traditional SEO. That is something we need to keep doing. It's optimizing the content. Then the next tier is optimizing the content creator, i.e. who created the content, an author. Google talks a lot about authorship, and it's very, very, very interested to understand who created the content, because it gives it another way to measure the credibility and the usefulness of the content by being able to measure the credibility of the author themselves. And then the third level is the publisher, which I just talked about. Who has published the content? And obviously the website doesn't publish content. It's a format, or it's a platform on which content is published by somebody or a company. And Google needs to understand who's published the content, to understand who's standing behind the content, to judge their credibility. So we have, as Google says, EEAT, in our case, NEATT, is at 3 levels: content, author, publisher.
So you've been doing SEO for 28 years. You started off when you were 4?
I'm very charmed by that comment. Thank you very much. No, I didn't.
So that's a lovely explanation of the different tiers of SEO, a great way to look at it. You say that just 2 of the tiers require entity optimization.
Yeah, so what we end up with is traditional SEO is tier 1. Tier 2 is content creator, author entity optimization. So we're looking at how do we demonstrate to Google who the author is and that they're credible. And then tier 3 is website owner optimization, the publisher optimization, another entity. Who is the company or the person behind the content, and why should Google trust them? And tiers 2 and 3 will add additional credibility, EEAT, NEEATT signals to the content that you're already optimizing. So it's not instead of, it's in addition to. And the key there is moving forwards. If you don't do tiers 2 and 3, the author and publisher entity optimization, you'll get left behind because your competitors will.
Is it not going to get to a stage where Google are going to get more comfortable with what your website represents, what your entity really is all about without entity optimization, or is optimization for the foreseeable future going to be required?
Well, I suppose it's the same question as, do we need SEO? Isn't Google going to get more and more comfortable at understanding content without us helping it by packaging that content for Google? The answer is Google always appreciates help. That's why we all have a job in SEO. And for author optimization and publisher optimization, there are always opportunities to package that better for Google and therefore draw more advantage from whatever neat credibility signals you have.
There's nothing like throwing a ball at someone and having it come back to you at twice the pace. Thank you, Jason. So tier 2, content creator optimization. What are the key ways to do that?
Well, in fact, we can just talk about author and content creator optimization because it's more or less the same for the publisher or the website owner, because it's entity optimization. So entity optimization becomes a real thing in SEO. And I created Kalicube back in 2015, and I created Kalicube Pro, which is our database and our system for analyzing Google search results and Google's knowledge graph API to understand how it understands entities and how we can change its perception of those entities. So the entity optimization machine is what I created in 2015 because I believed what Google was saying, from strings to things. Turns out I've been waiting 9 years for them to catch up. They couldn't actually do it. They were just saying they wanted to do it. I created the machine, and now Kalicube Pro is truly useful because it actually does something that affects Google's algorithms deep down and will affect us in the future, and is especially powerful in a world of AI with Google Gemini and ChatGPT. And the key to it is always the same thing. The Kalicube process is what I created to give a process to this. Create an entity home, a place where Google and ChatGPT and Bing and Perplexity, a place where they can see where the entity is presenting information about itself from itself. So as an author, you would create a personal website, 1 page, maybe 2, nothing more needed, where you present the fact about who you are, what you do, and which audience you serve. It then has the story from you about you, or the story about you from you, rather. And it can then go around the web, find all the other resources about you, and see if they corroborate that information.
I was just thinking about that word, corroborate, even before you said it, actually, because that's what you want to do, because Google aren't necessarily going to rely just on you. So where are you looking to corroborate that information? You mentioned Wikipedia earlier on. I guess that's an ideal scenario to give you that notability that you talked about. Are there other sites that you'd like to recommend as well?
Yeah, it depends obviously on the niche, and I love the fact that it depends, but we can say some definite certainties. Number one is all of your social media channels. They're what I call second party, i.e. you control the content of the page, but you don't control the platform. Then you can look at things in our industry like Search Engine Land, Search Engine Journal, Muck Rack for an author. But then it can be any profile page on any website that's relevant to your niche and has some kind of credibility. And what you would then do is link from your entity home, the website that you own, out to all of these sources to say to Google, over there, the same thing is being said about me, either by myself or a third party. If possible, a third party, that's the best. And then if possible, link back to the entity home so that Google can go out to the corroboration and back to the entity home, out to the next corroboration, back to the entity home, out to the next corroboration and back to the entity home, and consistently see the same pieces of information, who you are, what you do, which audience you serve. And you named that the infinite loop of self-corroboration.
Sounds painful, but I'm sure it's something key to think about. Yes, and if it is indeed an infinite loop, does it mean that we have to be continually updating the entity homepage, the about page of the entity, in order just to demonstrate that the entity is evolving and getting more authoritative over time?
Yes, exactly. And people often forget that we change, the world changes, and those updates are always necessary. The important thing to remember is the first chunk of work is very big. It means correcting, making consistent all of the different references to you across the web and linking them all back to the entity home, creating an entity home that makes sense and describes who you are and specifically which aspects of you Google should focus on. For example, I'm a musician. I've created cartoons, I've written books, but I'm also primarily a digital marketer and an entrepreneur. So I need to make sure that my homepage, my entity home, focuses on entrepreneurship and digital marketing and not on the music or the cartoons. Once you've done that, and within our Kalicube process, we generally expect it to take 3 months. It's not 3 months of 8 hours a day. It's 3 months to actually sort it all out and get it all organized, and give Google some time to digest it. And then after that, you need to continue to update it because you will publish more content. So you need to point out to that. Your career will evolve. Google's algorithms will evolve. And the world in general will evolve. Some platforms that you're currently linking to will change. And you need to change, potentially remove the link or change the information on the website if they've changed.
So is this primarily content creator optimization or website owner optimization that you're talking about here, or both?
Both. Here we're talking about the content creator, so you're talking about resources such as Muckrack, Search Engine Land, Search Engine Journal, Forbes.com for me, Entrepreneur.com for me as an entrepreneur. For the corporation, it would be a different set of sources. Crunchbase, for example, would work very well for a corporation. Wikidata is still good, but within marketing, it's a really dangerous thing to try to focus on because the Wikidata editors and the Wikipedia editors tend to delete anything that they feel is coming from the marketing industry because they consider it to be spam. So if you're in the marketing industry, that's something to take very cautiously because, and I'll tell you why, if you put something in Wikidata and it's then deleted, Google sees it, thinks it must be true, it's then deleted, and implicitly will then believe that it wasn't true after all, and it's very difficult to recover from that. So if you're not sure the Wikidata page will stick, don't create it.
So does this entity optimization assist with being discovered and included by AI search engines or AI LLMs?
All of these machines are functioning the same way. They have huge LLMs, which are huge amounts of textual or text information that allow them to create answers, content, solutions based on probability, but they can't fact check. So they all have knowledge graphs and they use those to fact check. So the idea of entity optimization is, number one, to create the consistency of message that the LLMs can then repeat what you're already saying. And number two, get your place in their knowledge graphs so that they can fact check on those LLMs, which is what's now happening.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time focusing on entity optimization in 2025?
I would suggest that the things that you can reduce your emphasis on, I wouldn't say to stop doing anything. Links are going to be less important in the future because entity optimization is creating what we've been referring to as linkless links in the past. They're now a reality. Google can identify who the author of a page is, so that's a linkless link. If it understands me as an author, it understands the web page or the article as an entity, as a thing that I have written, then it can apply my signals to it, and it needs less links to that article in order to understand that it's a helpful and authoritative, credible article. So link building is going to become less important. I don't say it's not important. I even said you need to link from the entity home to all of these different resources. Links become less important in the future. Site speed becomes less important in the future. So those are two things that I would stop worrying about quite as much as I was in the past.
Jason Barnard is CEO at Kalicube, and you can find him over at kalicube.com. Jason, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2025.
Thank you very much, David.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2025, the book, over at SEOin2025.com.